reading from the Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to share the inheritance with me." He replied to him, "Friend, who appointed me as your judge and arbitrator?" And he said to the crowd, "Take care to guard against all greed, for though one may be rich, one's life does not consist of possessions." Then he told them a parable. There was a rich man whose land produced a bountiful harvest. He asked himself, "What shall I do? For I do not have space to store my harvest." And he said, "This is what I shall do. I shall tear down my barns and build larger ones. There I shall store all my grain and other goods, and I shall say to myself, 'Now as for you, you have so many good things stored up for many years. Rest, eat, drink, and be merry.' God said to him, 'You fool, this night your life will be demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, to whom will they belong? Thus will it be for all who store up treasure for themselves, but are not rich in what matters to God.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
You know, the Western world is facing kind of a crisis right now in its response to terrorism and Islamic extremism. We've all seen the recent attacks in France, including this week a French priest who was martyred while celebrating Mass. Not to mention those unreported attacks in the Middle East on tens of thousands of Christians. And it's been suggested by some, and I tend toward this evaluation, that the Western powers stand somewhat impotent against terrorism because their power comes from their own people who are so relativistic in their morality that the heads of state can't come together to fight for what is objectively true and good. They can only fight for what's good for them in their estimation. 2, the secular media can't publicly recognize a coordinated attack on Christianity because that would require asking why this is. And to do so might reveal that at least part of the reason that the Catholic Church is that the Catholic Church is one of the only institutions left that seeks to communicate what is objectively true and good for all of humanity. Notice the subtlety in that statement. Communicate what is true and good, rather than determining for itself what is true and good. It's the only sort of position on morality that can exhort people to live according to the meaning of life and to seek true happiness rather than the fleeting pleasures of this life, to seek what matters to God above all else. It's certainly different than the prevailing position, you can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't infringe on my rights. Then that's really the only fault that the Western world can find with terrorists. Their killings have infringed on someone else's right to determine for themselves the meaning of their existence. Think about how ridiculous that sounds. And it's enshrined in some of our government's writings. At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life. This was written by 3 justices of the Supreme Court in Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the 1992 case that upheld a woman's right to choose to have an abortion. It's impossible to hold that each person is his own moral compass and not affect other people. The morality of those in power becomes the morality imposed on everyone else. And we'd be naive to think that we gathered here have remained immune to such ways of thinking. I mean, consider your own positions on church teaching or the way you practice your faith. Is there not, or at least has there not been in the past, a firm reluctance to assent to some teaching of the church. There's a temptation for us, too, to try to define what the faith is for ourselves. Okay, that's enough of a depressing start. We can start to work our way back out of it. What contributed to the political preoccupation with moral issues and the idea that what's right for me is right for me and what's right for you is right for you? Pope Benedict has suggested that at the heart of our moral decline in the Western world is a lack of forgiveness. Humans are moral beings, and there's a somewhat constant call for renewal in morality. But by what criteria? This is the constant debate, because that involves making laws, whether they're secular or religious. And to have a law means that there can be sin. And where there's sin, there is guilt. And where there's guilt, we are uncomfortable. And this is at the heart of it. Think of a time you were convicted by another person for something you had done. Whether you were right or wrong, there's a certain experience of guilt that often comes from this being held accountable. What a terrible feeling. But a common response is, what gives them the right? Who are they to call me out like that? Don't tell me what to do or how to live my life. Or my older brother's favorite, why don't you take off your white wig and stop judging me? There are many who will hear our gospel this weekend and not think anything of it, because living with a morality determined by oneself replaces the things that matter to God with the things that matter to me. Even if our accuser, the one who convicted us, was right in their estimation of our fault, it seems easier to us and more fulfilling to eliminate the reason for guilt than to be confronted by law, by sin. It seems easier to convince ourselves that there was nothing wrong with whatever it was that we did. But that isn't fulfilling. In our heart of hearts and in the hearts of those who have sought to eliminate the reality of guilt, this attempt is empty. And it's a small stone that contributes to the degeneration of morality altogether. The reality is that there is sin. And it's much more than just infringing on the rights of others. Making myself to be my own source of morality does nothing to quell the desire in me to be free from guilt. The proper response to guilt isn't to eradicate its existence, but to encounter forgiveness. Forgiveness is what holds morality together. The only way an institution can cling to absolutes, as the church does, is knowing that forgiveness is offered. And not only forgiveness, but the price owed for each offense, paid in full by Jesus on the cross. When we forgive others, we don't offer something new, but we participate in the reconciliation already offered to us by Jesus. And at the same time that Jesus paid the price for our sin, he was fulfilling the law and making it possible for us to satisfy it. The way to fulfillment in morality is not in eliminating guilt and law, but in encountering the mercy of God. The mercy of God that upholds every iota of the law, while paying the price for our sin, and while offering us the help to fulfill the law in our lives. The way of moral renewal in our world won't be paved through indifference or relativism. It will be paved by upholding the law of Jesus Christ as communicated through the church and truly encountering his mercy transmitted through the church. maybe that's something we haven't always done. Haven't always done well, at least. Transmitting God's mercy. Maybe we've emphasized the upholding of the law at the expense of an encounter with mercy. But we've also proven that it isn't good to transmit a false sense of mercy that's at the expense of the law that Jesus upholds. Mercy as forgiveness has no meaning apart from there being a law to uphold. The prime place for encountering the balance between law and mercy for us as Catholics is in the sacrament of confession. Unfortunately, that was also the place where at times the law was upheld at the expense of mercy, or the law was dispensed through a false sense of mercy. I think that's why our lines have shortened drastically in the past 50 years. But when I think about it today, and the priests that I know and the experience of others in the sacrament of confession, I can assure you that the balance is back. To find out what it means to uphold the law and encounter God's mercy at the same time, come to confession. We have it 3:30 to 4:30 every Saturday, and after 8:15 Mass on Fridays, and Father Bob and myself will take any appointment to hear one. Because really my prayer for all of us today is that we might encounter the Lord in such a way as to see, to experience the balance between the importance of moral law and encountering Jesus' merciful forgiveness. That when our lives are demanded of us, we too may be rich in what matters to God.